Right, so I've seen a ton of interest regarding the iPad Air 5, and so I thought I'd compile all the leaks, rumors, and some of my expectations for the next generation iPad Air 5. And so let's delve into everything, but first, make sure to like and subscribe for the latest Apple news and rumors, and with that being said, let's just tuck in. Right, so beginning with the release, allegedly we're seeing the iPad Air 5 in early 2022, and well, one question I get all the time is why is the iPad Air 5 not launching this year? Now of course, I'm not entirely sure why, but I do think one reason could be the fact Apple does not update the iPad Air on a yearly basis. For example, the iPad Air 3 was launched in March 2019, whereas the iPad Air 4 launched in September 2020, and so that is roughly an 18-month gap. And then before that, the iPad Air 2 launched in 2014, so that's a 5-year gap. So yeah, clearly they have no set structure with the refresh cycle of the iPad Air line. And so Apple can release this new iPad Air whenever they want, but it does seem that 18 months seems to be the refresh cycle most iPads follow, and so yes, that's why the early 2022 release makes a ton of sense. And by the way, when these leakers mean an early 2022 release, I think that means we're going to see a spring event, much like we saw this year, where we could see a new iPad Air alongside a new MacBook Air and a new iPhone SE. Now let's delve into the design next, and well, this isn't really going to change a lot in my opinion, because the iPad Air has pretty much peaked when it comes to the design, much like the iPad Pro, and so yes, I don't expect any major visual changes with the iPad Air. Now I do want to say there is a very small chance the dual cameras on the iPad Pro could come over to the iPad Air if we do see a triple lens upgrade on the 2022 iPad Pro, but I do think there is a very strong chance we can number one see a better selfie camera, but also the center stage feature on the iPad Pro come over to the iPad Air, since video calling is a massive thing now, and so Apple can easily market that as a massive feature with the iPad Air 5. And by the way, much like we see on the iPhones, I think there is a good chance we could see new colors with the iPad Air, though of course I have no idea what they are, and so yeah, let me know in the comments below what colors do you want to see with the next generation iPad Air. Anyways, moving on to the display, this is by far the biggest upgrade for the iPad Air, and that is a new OLED display. Now yes, I know some of you might be thinking, why is the budget iPad Air getting OLED before the higher end Pros? Well, apparently Minchi Kuo says that this will be a rigid form of OLED, and so it should be worse than the mini LED panel on the bigger iPad Pro. But of course, at the end of the day, it is an OLED panel, and so it's going to have a bevy of improvements over the current LCD display. Though do note, it will still be 60Hz, and that's the main reason why we don't have OLED on the bigger iPad Pros, and it's because getting a variable refresh rate to work with an OLED panel is very hard without the LTPO tech, and well, Apple and their suppliers can't produce LTPO, especially for those massive displays on the iPad on the scale Apple needs, because Apple sells way more iPads than the rest of the competition, and so producing certain components on the scale Apple needs just isn't feasible, and so that's probably why Apple won't be giving us OLED on the iPad Pro anytime soon, and maybe they do just stick to mini LED on the iPad Pros purely because it can get way brighter than an equivalent OLED panel. But of course, Apple won't have this issue with the iPad Air since it's always been 60Hz, and so they can go ahead and use regular OLED panels on the iPad Air 5. Now regarding the CPU, I think it's a pretty safe assumption that the iPad Air 5 will get the A15 SoC, because the iPad Air 4 got the latest iPhone SoC when it launched, and so I do expect the iPad Air 5 to follow suit. Though guys, I do want to get my tinfoil hat on and speculate that maybe the iPad Air 5 could get the M1, especially when the iPad Pro should be getting the update to M2 in 2022. Now, why do I think this? Well, I think a possible reason as to why we did not see Pro apps on the iPad is the fact Apple did not want to introduce a feature that would be exclusive to the M1 iPad Pro, and so maybe they're delaying this feature because they want more M-series powered iPads to of course be able to run these Pro apps. And so imagine when iPad OS 16 launches, there could be 3 potential iPads that have an M-series chip. We have the M1 iPad Pro, the M2 iPad Pro that should be launching next year, and then of course, potentially an M1 iPad Air alongside it. And so coming back to my point, since there will be 3 generations of the iPad that can run Final Cut, Logic Pro, Xcode, all these Pro applications, maybe Apple will then consider that, hey, it might be worthwhile to give us Pro applications on the iPad. Because I can't remember the last time a new iPad feature was only available on the newest iPad only, and so yes, I think that maybe Apple is waiting for more M-series powered iPads, and then they give us the Pro apps we've always wanted. Obviously, I do have to say this is just a theory, there is no evidence to support this whatsoever, and obviously I do want to say that Apple obviously wants you to buy an iPad and a Mac, and so maybe that's why we will never see Pro applications on the iPad, but if we do, I think it makes a ton of sense to give the iPad Air the M1, and then of course, it would have the ability to run all these Pro apps, and that would be absolutely insane. Anyways, moving on to the pricing, some of you guys might think that OLED automatically means a higher price. Well, apparently not, because Quo believes this rigid form of OLED should be just as cheap as the LCD panels we have right now, and so yes, I don't think there'll be any price hike with the iPad Air 5. And to be honest, I do think a price hike for the iPad Air 5 would not make a ton of sense because obviously right now there is a $200 gap between the 11-inch iPad Pro and the iPad Air, and so if that price gap was any smaller, there really would not be a point in buying the iPad Air 5 when you can just get the Pro with 120Hz, more RAM, and of course quad speakers. And so yes, we can be pretty sure the price is staying the same with the iPad Air 5. But one thing I do hope to see is 128 gigs of storage as standard on the iPad Air. It's about time. 64 gigs on an iPad is absolutely ridiculous. So give us either 128 gigs as standard, or at least give us the option to get 128 for $50 more, much like you can on the iPhone. Anyways, that's pretty much all my thoughts on the iPad Air, but let me know in the comments below what kind of upgrades do you want to see with the next generation iPad Air. Anyways, thank you for watching, make sure to like and subscribe for the latest Apple news and rumours. Check out the video in the icon above about details regarding the iPhone 13, and on that note I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya peeps!